last time I filmed here was my Mavic 3 review 3 years ago. So it's nice to be back somewhere familiar, but a place I haven't used for a while in my reviews. And I'm lucky with the weather because it's going to turn tomorrow. It's going to be chucking it down with rain, of course.
Almost everything shot in this video has the sharpness set to -2 and noise reduction to -2. It looks the most natural, and if you need to make your footage sharper or remove noise, then do it in post, as the results are always superior. In-camera sharpness rarely looks good. Remember, sharpness and detail are not the same thing. Most shots were shot in 10-bit D-Log-M, but I did a few in HLG. But as this edit is SDR, I had to convert them all to log anyway. If I get any technical facts wrong in this video, I will correct them in the pinned comment. Likewise, if there's any changes, I'll put them in there too.
I know I filmed this tree in so many different videos, but there's continuity about it. I love this spot here. It is visually interesting, and it means you can look back at the other videos and see how the shots compare. Because this is a very, very good drone with a really lovely new 1-inch sensor. But the key thing that everybody wants to know, not everybody, I don't think my mum cares, but people who are interested in drones want to know is it worth getting this over the Air 3? Is this a better drone, and how does it stack up to the obviously more expensive Mavic 3 Pro?
The Air 3 was released in the summer of 2023, and the single biggest change over the Air 2 and 2S was the addition of a second camera, a 70mm one, the same 70mm that the Mavic 3 Pro came out with a few months earlier. The single most significant change between the Air 3 and the Air 3S is the sensor size of the 24mm wide camera. It has a larger 1-inch sensor compared to the 1/1.3-inch sensor on the Air 3. The 70mm camera on the Air 3S is the same as the Air 3, so both use the same 1/1.3-inch sensor. The sensor size increase from the Air 2's 1/2-inch one to the Air 2S's 1-inch sensor was substantial. That's 4 times bigger, and the difference was very noticeable. But also the image in the Air 2S is less processed. The Air 2S's image still stands up today, unlike the Air 2's. But how much of a difference are the sensors in the Air 3 and the Air 3S when it comes to image quality and performance? In these side-by-sides that I filmed with Sarah Sill, thank you Sarah, the image on the main camera looks identical with them both. But these were graded to match. When you look at them in D-Log-M and start pixel peeping, there is a difference. It's not huge, but it's there. The Air 3S has slightly more dynamic range and exposes brighter, despite me setting the Air 3S to a higher shutter speed to get closer to the Air 3 shot, but it's still noticeably brighter. The Air 3S has that larger sensor with larger pixels, so it's more sensitive to light. So taking them both into the Catio, these were at identical settings. Because the Air 3S exposes brighter at the same settings, it looks better. The dynamic range is very challenging here, and yes, the Air 3S definitely wins. The Air 3's highlights are clipped, and the shadows are noticeably darker. The Air 3S held on to the highlights. The noise was actually less in this shot with the Air 3S, which isn't surprising, as the more light you give the sensor, the less noise you'll have in the shadows. Detail-wise, and don't forget I'm at -2 sharpness here, the Air 3S has slightly more than the Air 3. So yes, the 1-inch sensor of the Air 3S definitely produces a better image than the Air 3's 1/1.3-inch. The sensor size names are silly and really should change. They're based on an obsolete measurement for tubes in TV cameras, going back to before even I was born. I've got a whole video about it if you would like to know more. Sensors should be measured in millimeters, diagonally or in height and width. These days, the smallest sensor DJI use is the 1/2-inch one. It's what the Neo, the Mavic 3 Pro's 166mm telephoto camera, and the Air 2 have. All three 70mm cameras in the drones that I've mentioned have the larger 1/1.3-inch sensor, which is also in the Mini 3 Pro, Mini 4 Pro, and Avata 2. So how much bigger is 1-inch? Well, here you go. It may not look it, but the Air 3S's 1-inch sensor has 1.6 times more surface area than the Air 3S's. This is the same sensor that we have inside DJI's excellent Pocket 3. Whilst here, let's see how much bigger the other sensors inside DJI drones are. The 5.1K Mavic 3's 4/3 primary camera, the 6K Super 35mm of the X7, and the 8K full frame of the X9. Bigger sensors of the same resolution mean larger pixels, which are generally better in low light. I will show you some later in the video. What I really like about the two cameras on the Air 3 is that they use the same 1/1.3 inch sensor, so they match perfectly. Other than the focal length difference, the main one is that the 24mm has an f1.7 aperture and the 70mm has an f2.8. The 24mm of the Air 3S has an ever so slightly smaller aperture of f1.8, but this is more than made up for by the larger sensor's sensitivity. Both the Air 3 and 3S have the aperture difference of 1.3 stops. So when switching between the two cameras, you need to make adjustments to match their exposure when filming the same subject. If you have DJI's ND filters, they have split strengths, with the 70mm filter having a stop less light reduction than the 24mm. It would be so nice to have adjustable apertures on air drones. It's by far the best way to change your exposure in the air. However, this is still only available on the main camera of the Mavic 3 line. One thing to note is the Air 2S was capable of shooting 5.4K video up to 30p, which neither the Air 3 nor the Air 3S can do. It's a really useful resolution to shoot in for reframing, and it's a shame that 4K is the maximum with their next generation air drones.
It's good to see autofocus subject tracking on this, something that's missing on the other drones, and it really does help on the larger sensors, not larger, but larger sensors. Not that you can tell at this point, but you could close up.
They call it subject focusing and will lock on to certain subjects, such as me, whether in manual flight or tracking. If you don't do this, or you aren't tracking a specific subject, if say I go past a tree which is in the foreground, it will often quickly shift the focus onto it and then back again. So for these situations, I use manual focus and set it to infinity.
This is a good location to test out the tracking as well with all these trees. The Mavic 3 didn't do so well. I'm hoping this will be better. It should be. I just hope I brought enough props with me.
Whether I use spotlight tracking modes or just flying manually, I have the obstacle avoidance sensors set to bypass, and it does a terrific job. I don't think there's any major improvements here, beside the LiDAR sensor, but I'll talk about that more when the sun has gone down. But did I ever crash? Yeah, a number of times. Unfortunately, the skinny twigs still got it occasionally. Way less than I did with the Mavic 3, but I still went through more props than I would have liked to, as they aren't cheap. But it was worth it for the results that I got.
This is a very, very challenging shot for it. Maybe. Come on, you've got this. I mean, it makes no difference to what lens you're using for the tracking because it's using the sensors. So it should track just as well. It's just less forgiving than the wide angle will be for any little jerky movements. But I think it's doing pretty well, isn't it, really? In spotlight mode. Nice.
I don't like active track because I want a specific movement. So I like to be in at least semi-manual control. Active track does what it wants, and it rarely looks good for me.
What's it doing? It's supposed to be behind me. It doesn't like it. I don't like active track. Not for walking anyway. It's probably more forgiving on faster moving subjects, but for this, nah.
A nice improvement is the internal storage of the Air 3S is up from 8GB to 42GB, but I still recommend you always shoot using a micro SD card, and every time you come down and swap batteries, you should swap cards too, just in case something bad happens to your drone. That's replaceable, but your footage isn't. battery life is very similar to that of the Air 3. They are physically the same batteries, just with a different capacity. I was getting around 32 minutes on average per battery, which is pretty decent.
My main camera with drones is the wide one, the 24mm, which is the better camera, better sensor on this drone. But I really love having this second camera, 70mm, giving us a 3 times zoom effectively on a main camera. But I do miss the 166 that we have on the Mavic 3 Pro, because it is good. But can you get anything like that using this drone and Topaz Video AI? Well, there's only one way to find out, isn't there?
I love the perspective that you get with the 7x camera on the Mavic 3 and 3 Pro. The shots I can get are unlike anything I've ever captured with a drone. This is one of my earliest and favourite shots, showing the London skyline 9 miles away in the distance. My aim was to at least get a shot with the quality of the original Mavic 3 7x lens with my Air 3S. So I filmed the shot with the 70mm, making sure to set manual focus to infinity, just to be safe. And in the edit, by cropping into 200%, I was getting the equivalent of 150mm. Topaz Video AI is needed to get the shot to look good. I tried 2 different methods, exporting the full uncropped shot and upscaling to 8K, and also exporting the cropped shot in Premiere as 1080p and then upscaling to 4K. They both look pretty good. Not as good as what you can get from the Mavic 3 Pro's superior 7x now, but on a par with the original Mavic 3s. The 70mm focal length is perfect for a second camera, and if you love this camera on the Mavic 3 Pro or Air 3, you will love it here, as it's exactly the same. And I think these shots are probably my favourite ones of all of that. They were actually shot on the Air 3, as just as I took her up to get some shots, the light became magical combined with the mist. But of course it would have looked exactly the same had I been using the Air 3S.
With the light that we have today, got the sun behind me, not many clouds. It's a great time to be using the Diffusion plugin from Film Convert.
I'm sure you've spotted the graphics on screen that have said Hazy or Halation on some of the shots. These are the new standalone plugins for Premiere or DaVinci Resolve from Film Convert, who have very kindly sponsored this video. Hazy is for digital diffusion, and it does a very nice job of emulating different types of diffusion filters. There are presets, but you can also dial in exactly what you want via strengths, intensity and spread. Using the diffusion map, you can see exactly what's being affected by your settings. You can also set your pitch profile for your camera, but I tend to use it after grading, so I just select Rec 709. I like to keep it relatively subtle, as what I generally want is a subtle and delicate diffusion and bloom of the highlights. It's really nice to use a drone footage, especially because if you're using an optical diffusion filter, if it's the wrong strength, then you have to bring the drone back and swap it out. Plus, if you even have a different strength. Also, buying diffusion filters for drones means getting them for each new model, and that's expensive. For normal cameras and lenses, you just buy them once and that's it. Halation is now available as a standalone plugin or as part of Film Convert Nitrate. This is designed to emulate the halation byproduct that you get when shooting on film. This is something you can't replicate optically when using digital cameras. You'll see this on highlights and get a red edge effect. And unlike when shooting on film, you can fine-tune this to the strength and even the saturation that you want. What's so nice about both of these plugins is you can go back to your old work that wasn't shot with any diffusion filters and add it to them. I did this to the re-edit of the film about my late dad earlier this year. I used halation to give the highlights a subtle blooming effect, but I didn't want the red, so I brought the saturation down, and also to smooth out his skin a little bit.
Most people I come across seem to like me.
Naturally, I still believe in optical diffusion filters where appropriate, but sometimes you don't want to commit to baking it in. But another benefit of using it digitally is getting that constant diffusion across all focal lengths. And that's probably the most challenging thing about using optical ones, especially with zoom lenses. There are free trials for all Film Convert plugins at this link, as well as a 10% discount. The recording bitrate is lower in the Air 3S than in the Air 3 and Mini 4 Pro, which both have the same bitrate. DJI say their compression algorithm has been optimized by over 30%. The specs state a maximum bitrate for both H.264 and H.265 as 150 megabits per second on the Air 3, but with the Air 3S, it's 130 megabits per second. I've never got close to either of those figures. When shooting in 25p with the Air 3, I was getting about 90 megabits per second. Air 3S, 75 megabits per second. In 50 or 60p, around 130 megabits per second with the Air 3, but only 90 megabits per second on the Air 3S. The slow motion bitrate is far too low on both drones. What's odd is how it records them. The Air 3 4K slow motion is 100 frames per second and records that as 25p, which is good for me, but not for lots of people. The Air 3S slow motion is 120 frames per second and it only records that as 30p, which isn't really ideal for me. You cannot change the recorded frame rate for either. It would be nice if you could. I would much rather DJI use a new algorithm to improve the image quality by keeping the bit rates the same as the Air 3. I don't care about smaller file sizes. It's not like micro SD cards are expensive and drone shots tend to be moving, so you want as little compression as possible. You can take 12 or 50 megapixel photos with the main camera, or 12 or 48 megapixels with the 70mm camera. By combining the pixels to create the lower megapixel count, you get better dynamic range and less noise. But in good light, the higher megapixel ones do look good with that extra detail. There's a new panorama mode that lets you select the top left and bottom right of what you want it to photograph, which is very nice. I always shoot in RAW, of course, especially as there's no sharpness control in stills for JPEGs. All the auto panoramas are shot using 12 megapixels, but you can shoot manually in 50 or 48 megapixels, depending on the camera, like I did here.
So I'm pretty happy with what I got today. I'm gone through a few more props, and ideally I would like to. And I would love it if I could actually have the tracking at this sort of height. But you know, other than that, it's a great drone. Now that the sun's gone, we can see what the Air 3S is like in low light. And there's going to be no light here very shortly because there is no artificial light. I'm out in the middle of the woods. I'm not expecting much anyway because it's only a 1-inch sensor. You need to be realistic about these things. A micro four thirds sensor is not going to be great in low light. But, well, I think it's going to be a little bit better than the Air 3, of course, but not massively. So it's my last battery anyway. I've gone through 5 out here filming. So I've been filming for about 2.5 hours. Okay, I think I should probably take her up. You got this. There we go.
The Air 3S is better in low light for 2 main reasons: the larger sensor with the larger pixels, and you can now shoot up to 3200 ISO in D-Log-M. The Air 3S tops out at 1600 ISO. Is it noisy at 3200 ISO? Sure, there's noise, but nothing that can't be cleaned up in post. Just don't do it in camera. The front-facing LiDAR did a good job of not crashing into things. It's mostly there for returning to home safely at night. Just remember, it's only front-facing, so don't start flying off sideways.
In case you're wondering what the marks on my forehead are, I walked into the drone yesterday when I was flying. Well, it was just stationary and I wasn't paying attention, and I sort of stood up and walked into it. It hurt, but it could have been a lot worse. So yeah, be careful, and it's really close to you. And you know, if you're going to do any flying, filming close up, if you can do it of yourself, be very, very careful, and wear some safety goggles or glasses, but you're not really, because the close focus of the Air 3S in its macro mode is stupidly close. No idea why it's that close, but because it's that close, I will try it.
Filming handheld with the Air 3S is kinda daft, especially as I have the excellent Pocket 3, but it's a really good way of seeing how the image looks in different situations, and of course in low light. Plus I can see how much juicy bokeh I can get out of it, so why not? Plus it gets some festive shots into this video, which will date it very quickly. If you already have an Air 3, you should keep that. It's already a fantastic drone. This is better because of the internal memory, the LiDAR, but the main reason is of course the 1-inch sensor of the main camera. The image from it improves the dynamic range, and there's a bit more detail and a bit less noise. Whilst it's not the massive jump that the Air 2S was from the Air 2, the Air 3S is now my favourite drone. Not including the Mini 4 Pro, as that sub 250 gram weight is invaluable, but we won't be seeing a Mini with a second camera anytime soon, that's for sure. And when I fly my Mini 4 Pro, I really miss that 70mm. A lot.